Greetings, this is the Crunchy Fed, and this is part 6, and the finale to What If Female Deku Was a Xenomorph. Now, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, I had made a poll a couple hours ago to dictate what if I should do after I finish this series, and I will upload the winning one tomorrow or the day after. I don't know. I'll just upload it when I feel like it. So, and I will be concluding the stuff with the Xenomorph King and all that. So, don't worry about it. Anyway, continuing, we open up to Class 1A as they are getting their internships. As when Izumi is looking at her internships, she sees that she had actually gotten the highest amount of internships out of everyone there. She even got higher than Todoroki's. As she is looking down the list of internships, and she sees that one of her internships is from her mother, Midnight. So she opts to go to Midnight because I don't know where Midnight's actual hero HQ is actually based, so I'll say it's based in Hostess City for plot convenience. As she will Izumi gets her internships filled out and sent, as Izumi asks where Mina will go for her internship, as I don't remember where Mina went for her internship. Sorry about that. As I was saying, I don't know what Mina's internships were in canon. So I'll say that she goes to Hold on, give me a minute. So I tried to find where Mina went for her internship, but I couldn't, so I'll say she went to Midnight as well. So the next day, Izumi and Mina take the train to Hostess City, where they would arrive and head to Midnight's Hero HQ. As Izumi's tail is sort of like wiggling about a bit, as Mina would point it out, as Izumi would say, don't point it out, please. It's embarrassing. Sorry about that. I had to get something out of the room real quick. Anyway, continuing, as Izumi would say, don't point it out. As soon as they open the doors to Midnight's office, she is there. As Midnight would immediately stand up and say, Izumi, how's my little girl doing? As she would say, I'm doing alright, mother. And this is one of my classmates, Mina Ashido. As hold on. Sorry about that. As Midnight would go up to shake Mina's hand, as she'd say, oh, so you're the girl my daughter is talking about a lot. As Mina would immediately begin to turn red, as she would say, what do you mean? As Midnight would say, oh, she's actually been talking about you a lot recently. She's been complimenting you. She's been talking about you a lot ever since you rescued her from the water zone in the USJ. As Izumi would immediately begin to turn red, as Izumi is saying, mother, please stop, you're embarrassing me. As Midnight would say, it's a parent's job to embarrass their child, and I'm willing to do that 100% of the way. As that would end with Midnight then stating that they would go out on patrol in a couple of hours, so be prepared for that. And I'll say that Midnight's area hero agency does have like a bunker, is a like rooming area for the interns. On. Sorry about the abrupt pausing. I'm just trying to come up with a story part, so I will pause quite frequently throughout this. Anyway, so they end up sleeping in separate room areas. Yeah, they end up sleeping in staying in separate rooms. Jesus Louise, I cannot speak today. They'd get their stuff ready as they'd end up going out on patrol. As while they're walking, a lot of people recognize Izumi as the winner of the sports festival. As a lot of people who are walking by are saying, "Hey, isn't that the winner of the UA Sports Festival?" As another one would say, "Yeah, I didn't think we'd get to see her in person." Along with the pro hero Midnight as well. As another one would say, "Yeah, you gotta be really lucky in order to see one of the top pro heroes alongside the winner of the sports festival." As they would stop a few crimes along the way on their patrol, with Izumi not having to access her queen or empress forms. Sorry about that. As we'll cut to the Hostess City incident. As while Izumi and Mina and Midnight are out on patrol, there's a loud explosion that comes about as they would see a Nomu flying down coming down from a railway area. As Midnight would try to fight it, as Izumi would say, these are like the ones we encountered at the USJ. Go for the brain. It'll take them out immediately. They're not human, so you can go all out." As Izumi would immediately remember, wait, Ida is in Hosted as well, and Stain was spotted here last time, which means Ida's probably gonna have to Stain. As Izumi would say, "Mina, do you think you can hold these off? I'm gonna rescue Ida. He could be in trouble." As Mina would say, "Okay, be safe." As Izumi would yell, "I will," as she would immediately run off. As just as she rounds the corner, she sees that Stain is about to stab into Ida. With Izumi immediately running up and basically deflecting Stain's blade strike with her bladed tail, which causes some sparks to fly from the both of them as Stain backs off. Well, by jumping back, as the tip of the tail was about to strike him. As Izumi is sort of like standing over Ida, sort of like how if you know how like some big cats will stand over their children as a form of like a way to protecting them. That's sort of like how Izumi is with Ida. She's sort of like down on her hands and feet, sort of like covering Ida. As Stain would say, "Ah, another one of you fake heroes. Well, I guess guess means you're another one to cull for the herd. So that the true hero society can emerge as Izumi would say, a true hero society. You're murdering people. Well, yes, I agree hero society is corrupt, but that doesn't give you a right to kill people just because they've done bad things as heroes. And killing a future hero is not the right course of action either. As Stain would say, why shouldn't I? He's only here for revenge. If he were a true hero, he would have went and rescued him, as he pointed his blade towards Native, and gone out of here without having to confront me. But he chose to show his true colors as a fake hero, as Izumi would say. And then if he's a fake hero, and you see yourself as the one who will make the true hero society, then you're the fakest hero out of all of them. As Stain would immediately be enraged by this assessment, as he'd yell, "How dare you!" as he would charge towards Izumi, as he'd thrust his blade forward, as he would feel a sharp pain in his stomach, as he would look down and see that Izumi's bladed tail has pierced it, as Izumi would say, "You might want to work on your anger there, Stain. Or, because else you would have noticed that," as she would have immediately ripped the blade out, her bladed tail out from Stain's stomach, as he would drop to one knee, grabbing the hole that Izumi's tail had left. Now, if you guys remember from a couple parts ago, I said that heroes were allowed to kill villains if they proved too much of a threat. And Stain is the highest threat there is. As Stain would begin to cough up blood, as he would say, "If you kill me right now, I will become a martyr. If you imprison me, I will become a martyr. Either way, you fake heroes will never win." And if you're wondering, yes, that cough was for Stain. As Izumi would say, "Well then, guess that means there's just going to be a lot for us to deal with." As Izumi would raise her tail up, and just before she could finish the job, Ida's paralysis wore off, as he'd grab Izumi's tail, as he would say, no, don't kill him. If you kill him, you'll just prove his point. If you lock him up in prison, yes, he will still become a martyr, but his point won't be proven. We can become true heroes if we try hard enough." As Izumi would look towards Ida, as she'd sigh, as she'd then say, "You're right," as she'd then lower her tail back to the ground, as she'd say, "But that doesn't mean I won't do this," as she would grab the back of Stain's head and knee him right in the face, knocking him out, as Stain would collapse to the ground, as his hand was still covering the wound that Izumi had given him. As they would end up tying Stain up and giving him to the authorities, as they would have Endeavor take all the credit for capturing Stain, like in canon. As once Izumi had met back up with Midnight and Mina and Midnight immediately ran towards Izumi, as Midnight and Mina would say, "Where were you? We were so worried about what happened." As Izumi would say, "We had an encounter with Stain. I held him off long enough to protect Ida, and then Endeavor came and helped and captured him," which was a complete lie, and Izumi was basically praying to any god and to the universe that they would fall for it, that they would believe it. as, oh, sorry about that, as they would end up believing it, as the, internship would end, and Izumi and Mina would head back to UA. As it is now time for the final exams. As, Izumi and Bakugo are paired up against All Might, as everybody else is paired up as they were in canon. With, so yes, Mina will still fail the, still fail her final exam, as Izumi and Bakugo would enter the city area. Izumi would say, it'd probably be best if we stick to the shadows and alleyways, since All Might would have a harder time finding us that way. As Bakugo would say, I'm not following orders from you. We're going to take him head on. As Izumi would look over to Bakugo as she would think to herself, is this man brain dead? Like, he's wanting to take the number one hero head on. Like, I know I'm strong, but I cannot take on the number one hero. Come on. As Izumi would immediately wrap her tail around Bakugo's neck as she says, nope, that's a fundamentally stupid idea, and we're not going for it. We're doing my plan. As Bakugo would begin to, struggle, as he'd say, let go of me, you freak. As once they go into the alleyway, Izumi would slam Bakugo up against the wall, as she would then grow to her queen stage, as she'd say, look, I am just as pissed I'm having to work with you, which is the literal embodiment of wrath and an angry Pomeranian, and a Chihuahua mixed into one. We are working together just so we can pass this exam. Whether you like it or not, we are doing my plan, because your plan is stupid. Do I make myself clear? As Bakugo would say, yes, ma'am. As Izumi would say, good. As she would end up dropping Bakugo as she'd revert back to her warrior stage. As she would say, now let's continue sneaking, because I'm pretty sure that ruckus alerted All Might to our position, so we gotta keep going. As they would begin to continue moving through the alleyways, as once they get to the edge of the city, where the fake city is, Izumi sees the exit gate. As Bakugo would immediately go to try and rush for it. As Izumi couldn't stop him in time, she'd think to say quietly, no, you fool! As All Might would crash down in front of Bakugo, as he would say, this is the end of the line for you, heroes. Why? Because I am here. As All Might would begin his assault on Bakugo, with Izumi shifting into her Empress stage immediately to grab All Might and fling him into the ground, which he succeeds on doing, with All Might immediately getting up and punching Izumi in the face, sending her back a bit, as she would then look back at All Might, as she would wipe her mouth and flick her arm, as some spurts of her acidic blood would begin to dissolve the ground. As Izumi would say, that was a good hit, but let me show you what a real hit is like. As she would then punch All Might right in the face, sending him flying. As she would say, Bakugo, go now, hurry. As Bakugo would say, don't give me orders. As Izumi would say, Bakugo Katsuki, if you do not make it to that gate, we both fail. and I am not willing to go through summer school with you, okay? As Bakugo would immediately begin to run for the exit gate, with Izumi holding off All Might until Bakugo nearly reached the end, with Izumi then throwing All Might back as she would shift back into her warrior stage and sprint for the gate, as Bakugo and Izumi would both pass through the gate, as they would both end up passing their final exam, with Izumi immediately sitting down on a chair and putting an ice pack on her face. And that punch from All Might did her a lot. She was trying to play off as it not hurting as much, but it did her a ton. As the final exams would end up concluding, as Izumi would have heard over the intercom that Mina and Denki had failed their final exam, as Izumi would walk up to Mina and pat her on the shoulder, as she'd say, "Hey, there's always next time, am I right?" As Mina would say, "Yeah, you're right. There is always next time." As they would end up walking off. As we will now get to the 4th training camp arc, with the entirety of Class 1A headed toward the 4th training camp. Mina and Izumi are in the same seat. Not in the same seat, they're in the same row, and they're sitting next to each other, and they're talking to each other. Now, Aizawa sees this, and his hair is beginning to rise up a bit, and Mina sees this as she is absolutely terrified, as Izumi would give a similar glare to Aizawa, which he would immediately turn around, as he'd think to himself, she has her mother's glare. It's absolutely terrifying. As once they reach the campsite, the Wild Wild Pussycats introduce themselves like they do in canon, and they are then sent off the cliff like in canon. But Izumi would end up grabbing Mina, sort of like by the back of her collar, as she'd then dig her claws. She'd actually grow into her queen stage and dig her claws and foot into the cliffside as she'd begin to sort of like glide down it. As they begin to slow down, as just before they reached the bottom, they completely stopped, to where Izumi would end up dropping Mina and remaining in her queen stage just in case. As Mineta would run off to use the bathroom like he did in canon and find out one of the earth monsters, as Izumi would then shift into her Emperor stage, realizing that she would remain in her queen stage, as she would begin to do battle with some of these monsters while Class 1A deals with the ones that they did in canon. As loud crashing and Izumi's xenomorph-like screeches could be heard from the forest, as once they reach its sunset, Izumi's walking out of the forest with a few cuts on her body, with some of her acidic blood dripping down. Now, these aren't deep enough to where they'd call scars, so she is completely fine. As everybody else would get to the training camp in the same states they were in canon, as Izumi would revert back into her warrior stage, as she'd get down on her hands and knees, as she is basically nearly passing out at this point from exhaustion. As Izumi being dramatic and saying, "Mina, help me!" As Mina would say, "Izumi, please, I'm tired as well. Stop being dramatic." As Izumi would say, "Come on, please help me." As Mina would say, "Fine, fine, come on." As she would help Izumi up. As everything else would go like it did in canon, with the onsen scene being different with Izumi on the girl's side. As when Mineta tried to climb up the wall, Izumi shifted into her Empress stage. As she basically reaches the top of the wall at the same time Mineta does. As she basically sort of like has her fingers sort of like in a flicking position. As she would say, "Yeah, no, you're going back down." As she would flick Mineta's forehead. As he would fall backwards. As he would then fall back into the boys' area. As Izumi would then revert back to her warrior stage and get back into the hot water. As we then get to the League of Villains attack on the training camp. With the villains attack being similar to it was in canon, except the Xenomorph King is there as well, and he had unlocked a new form, like Izumi. This isn't an actual canon one in the not the SCP, in the Aliens canon, but I'm making up here. It's called the Xenomorph Emperor. Sort of like how there's an Empress, there would be an Emperor. As the Xenomorph King would begin to basically decimate, sort of like walk through the entire area looking for Izumi. As if you guys are wanting to know what his plan for Izumi is, basically due to them having similar quirks, he's wanting Izumi to forcefully marry him so that their offspring would be the most powerful quirk user in the world and end up ruling it. And so that's the Xenomorph King's plan for Izumi. He wants her to forcefully marry him. As Izumi would have defeated Muscular at this time using her Emperor stage and stabbing him right through the heart with her tail. Sort of like how the Xenomorph Queen did to one of the Predators in the first Aliens vs. Predator movie. Sort of something similar to that. And for those of you who are gamers out there, it was the Xenomorph's fatality in Mortal Kombat X. So yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good representation for you film buffs and you gamers out there who watch my stuff. As Izumi will locked eyes with the Xenomorph King, as the Xenomorph King would immediately begin to transform, as Izumi would put Kota down, as she would say to Kota, "Kota, you need to run and alert the heroes that the king is here." As Kota would say, "Well, why?" As the Izumi would say, "Because this was the same guy who attacked us during the USJ and nearly killed me with the help of that no-moose creature." As the Xenomorph King would walk towards her, as he would say, "Well then, it is now a fair fight. It is just you and me. No other assistants in the area." As Izumi would say, "Well, is that so? Well then, I guess it's time for a battle that we've been waiting for." As Izumi would then shift into her Queen stage, as the Xenomorph King would shift into his King stage, They would then battle, with Izumi incorporating a similar strategy to what she did in the USG, where she would sort of like use her agility to her advantage and dodge around the king's attacks. Because the king's attacks have not evolved from the USJ, so he still uses a brawler type fighting style. So this fight would eventually escalate to the point where they make it out into an opening where the pro heroes are battling the other villains, with the king basically charging towards Izumi, as Izumi would end up flipping him over and nearly stabbing him in the head, but her tail stabs into the ground as the king dodges and goes in for a hit on Izumi as she would dodge out of the way. As Izumi would end up shifting into her Emperor stage, as the king would end up shifting into his Emperor stage, as they would sort of like clash in strength, as their hands would lock, as they would begin to sort of like overpower each other. With Izumi having the slight advantage, as she would then end up repeatedly trying to stab the king with her tail, with it all missing. With Izumi then pulling a fast one on him and kneeing him right in the stomach, as Izumi would then flip him over again and try to stomp on his chest, where he dodges, and a crater is created, and an imprint on the ground is created. As Izumi is basically the king is exhausted at this point, and so is Izumi a little bit. As Izumi would dash, as her tail is a couple inches from the king's chest, ready to kill him, until Mr. Compress sort of like puts his thing, touches Izumi, as she's then compressed into a marble. As Aizawa would see this, as he would yell no, as he would sort of like try to stop Izumi from being taken, as Aoyama's naval laser would end up hitting Mr. Compress, as he would end up dropping the 3 marbles, as Class 1A would grab 2 of them, those being Tokoyami and Bakugo, but the third one, which was Izumi, was grabbed by Dabi, as it was Mina who was reaching out for the one Izumi was in, as he would say, "Well, now that's a shame, isn't it?" As he would disappear through the portal, as Mina, feeling she failed, would punch the ground repeatedly and yell, "Damn it, I was so close." As she would keep doing this repeatedly until her knuckles started to end up bleeding. As the police and pro heroes would arrive on scene, including Midnight, as Midnight would ask what happened, as they'd explain the situation of how Izumi was kidnapped by the villains. As Midnight begins to start crying, as her daughter had been taken by the villains, as everybody would get to the hospital with them trying to figure out where Izumi could be, with Momo pointing out that she had put a tracker on one of the Nomus that were at the campsite, and that they could use use a tracking device to find where Izumi is. As Momo would create a copy of the trackers, as Mina would end up forming the Izumi Rescue Squad, which would consist of Momo, Todoroki, Mina, obviously, and Kirishima. we then get to the, we cut to Izumi, who is in the League of Villains base, and she's currently back in her warrior stage, as Shigaraki is maniacally laughing, as, I'll say that Izumi is currently being held in one of these, you know how okay, if you guys have played the, Aliens vs Predator game that came out in 2011, I believe it was, where in the Xenomorph story, the Xenomorph is sort of like locked in this capture thing. Yeah, that's sort of like what Izumi's caught in right now. So her tail can't move, her hands can't move, and her entire body basically can't move. As Shigaraki's maniacally laughing, as he's saying, "Oh, we caught somebody from Class 1A. Now, will you join the League of Villains?" As they're currently trying to get Izumi to join the League of Villains. As Izumi would say, "Yeah, the day I join the League of Villains would be the day that I die. Now let me out of here, and I won't think about ripping you all to shreds." As the king would begin laughing, as he would say, "I'd expect nothing less from my queen." As Izumi would look over to the king, and she would say, "I am not your..." Okay, first of all, you're a simp, and second of all, I am not your queen. Now, let me out of this, now. Hold on. And just as Izumi finished that sentence, All Might would break through the wall, as the entire League of Villains would sort of like be dealt with. They weren't canon, except for that the king would still be awake. As Izumi would have been broken out from the containment thing that she had left in, as All For One would pull the sneaky and teleport Izumi away to the former Nobu Lab. As Izumi would be stood right in front of All For One, as All For One would say, "You have done a good job, Shigaraki. I'd expect nothing less from my best student." As Shigaraki would say, "Thank you, my master." As Izumi is basically thinking, "Okay, how can I get out of this situation? Okay, we got Crusty Hands, we got the simp, and we got the crazy yandere girl who probably wants to drink my blood, but will die trying. Now then, how can I get out of this predicament?" As All Might would come crashing into All For One, sending All For One through a building. As Izumi would say, "Speak of the devils as an opportunity," as she would then punch Shigaraki in the face, knocking him out. As the king would then shift into his king stage, as Izumi would then shift back into her queen stage, as they'd continue their fight, with Toga and the other members of the league trying to deal with Izumi, except for Shigaraki because he's knocked out now. As Izumi's basically swatting the smaller League of Villains members like flies, while the king is actually presenting more of a challenge, as he is basically slashing towards Izumi, as the Izumi Rescue Squad is basically watching this. As the fight between Izumi and the king would go on for a while, until Izumi would end up getting the upper hand, with the king making a mistake that would cost him his life. As the king would would begin to wildly start attacking. The wall that the Izumi rescue squad would be hiding behind would crumble as a brick would hit Mina, hitting her in the head. As Izumi would have seen Mina injured, as this would have caused Izumi to go into an enraged state, where the king was going to sort of slash in like a diagonal pattern, as Izumi would have dodged in the opposite direction of the slash and sent her tail barreling towards the king, as it would go right through the king's chest, piercing his heart. As the king in his king form would be screeching out in pain, as Izumi would begin to dig the tail deeper and deeper and deeper through the king's chest until it reached out the other end, where the king would have fallen in battle, as Izumi would have retracted her tail from its torso and went back into her warrior stage, as the king would revert back to his normal state. As Izumi would look at the king's body, as she would have said, "That's a shame. If you decide to become a hero, we possibly could have become friends. But you decide to go for the wrong path." Now, Izumi basically respected the king, even though he tried to forcefully make her his bride. She admired his skill in combat and the fact that he actually managed to capture her, and had seen him as a rival. As the king's eyes were still opened, as Izumi would walk over and move her hand over the king's face to close his eyelids, as she would say, "May we meet again in the next life, my rival." As she'd then stand up and then run off to Mina to help her up, as a fight between All Might and All For One would go as in canon, with All For One being defeated and All Might losing his quirk. As we then get to the overhaul arc, as actually, so I'll do like between the overhaul arc and All Might's last battle, Izumi and Mina had started dating. So at this point, they'd been dating, at the time of the overhaul arc, they'd been dating for about 3 months. They'd been dating for. And Aizawa and Midnight are very accepting of their relationship. As Izumi would have been out on patrol with Mirio for her internship with Night High, as a small child would have bumped into her, as Izumi would have asked her if she was alright, as she would then go and put her hand out to help Eri, as Eri would sort of like flinch, as Overhaul would say, I see you found my daughter. I do apologize. She is quite a troublemaker." And as Izumi is basically looking at Overhaul, she is detecting so many red flags from Overhaul. As Izumi would begin to quiz Overhaul, as she would say, "Okay, so if this is your daughter, then what's her name?" As he would say, "Her name is Eri." As she'd then say, "What is her age?" As Overhaul would say, "She is 7 years old." As Izumi would then ask the final question, as she would then say, "What is her date of birth?" As Overhaul would immediately freeze up, as I don't actually think Overhaul knew Eri's date of birth because I don't think that he actually got attached to Eri at all. So Izumi would have said, "Got ya, Mirio, now." As I think I said, I made Mirio the successor of One for All. If not, then he is the successor. I'm sorry, because I do not remember the story very well. As Mirio would charge up One for All, as he would then launch a Detroit Smash towards Overhaul, as Overhaul would be taken out fairly easily. I'm sorry if you guys wanted a more cinematic battle. I'm just trying to get this series done. Please do not attack me for that. As Eri would have been rescued, as Aizawa would have gone the adoption papers down for Eri, as Eri would have become Izumi's adoptive younger sister. As we then get to the UA School Festival, where Gentle Criminal is dealt with by Izumi by knocking him out, along with La Barava. As the Hero 2, the whole concert and the Hero 2 song would happen as it did in canon, with Eri beginning to smile. As now, since Season 5 is not done yet, I'm not going to be covering Season 5, mainly because it's not finished and I haven't seen it yet. So until it's finished, then I won't be covering Season 5 for my What Ifs. So we will now cut to years in the future, where Eri is currently in Class 1A, and Izumi is the current number 1 hero, with her hero name being the Xenomorph Queen. As I'm not going to be covering the Queen Mother because it was only mentioned once in a novel, and it was about a Xenomorph civil war. So I'm sorry if you guys want to see a Queen Mother stage. I do apologize for that, but if I do end up redoing this What If, I will give her the Queen Mother stage. So Izumi is happily married to Mina Ashido, and they have 2 children. And if you're wondering if some of you might be wondering how is that possible, did I come up with some super weird sci-fi explanation for that? I'm going to say no. It's actually this is going to diverge off into like a little science thing. They actually had a surrogate father. So that's how they managed to have 2 kids, because they had a surrogate father who gave his half of the DNA, while I'll say that for the first child it was Izumi, and for the second child it was Mina. So Izumi and Mina both have their kids. I'll say the surrogate father would be give me a minute. I'll say the surrogate father would be Kirishima. Yeah, I'll say it's Kirishima, because Kirishima is both of their best friend is Izumi and Mina's best friend, so Kirishima's an obvious choice. So they'd both live happily married with their 2 kids. And that is the end of this What If. This is nearly 50 minutes long. So I do hope you guys enjoyed this series. And for those of you who made it to the end, just a reminder that I have released a poll. So if you guys want to participate in that to dictate what If will come after this, you can. And I will see you all next time. Ta-ta, and I do hope you've enjoyed this story.